Hello again, you're with View from Stormont. Now to our commentators. Tonight I'm joined by Alison Morris from the Belfast Telegraph and Professor Peter Shirlow from the University of Liverpool. Peter, Liz Truss will be the next Prime Minister, but it was no landslide.
No, and she's got the problem, of course, is she's less popular than the person that she's replaced. Most certainly wasn't a landslide, as was being predicted. Clearly, there's not a lot of enthusiasm within the Conservative Party. Many of the commentators who are associated with that party are already questioning her capacity to hold the party together. They're questioning her capacity to maintain the majority, and they're also questioning her ability. And it seems that her accession, which clearly is part of her personality, was to be the leader of that party. But there's no real faith or confidence in her being the Prime Minister at this point.
Earlier in this programme, Alison, we heard the views of Alliance, DUP and Sinn Féin. Are those views likely to be reflected right across the political spectrum now?
Well, look, we know that Liz Truss was the DUP's choice of Prime Minister. She was the architect of the Protocol Bill, which they're in favour of. And we knew, obviously, then that meant that the other parties who would like to go back into some sort of negotiation with the EU rather than push some nuclear button and potentially start a trade war were not going to be as embracing of her being the next Prime Minister. I mean, I suppose we have to give her a chance. We have to see how she beds in. But she has held some very senior positions in Cabinet throughout her political career. And, you know, up until now, I suppose it's been less than impressive. She had a real moment today where she had a speech, her first speech as leader. You know, she had to lay out her stall. It wasn't very inspiring. It wasn't very powerful. And what the DUP won't have liked is she said that Boris was the man who got Brexit done. As far as the DUP are concerned, Brexit is far from done. So they won't have been, I don't think they'll have been too happy with that line.
I know that she will have her hands full. She will be the Prime Minister of the entire United Kingdom, but I would have thought in this part of the world people are going to be wondering, well, how high up the agenda will be the protocol?
I think it's very high. I was at the British-Irish Association at the weekend in Oxford, and of course at that you have senior Irish, British and European politicians speaking, and it was very much a mood which was negotiations will start soon. The negotiations need to happen and there needs to be some compromise. One of the things that's really important here is what Liz Truss knows. Brexit has been bad for the economy of the UK. If you're going to continue with an aggressive attitude towards the European Union, such as Article 16, you're going to enter into a trade war with Europe. And I think many senior Tories and many industrialists have made it very clear to her that they are not going to have the British economy thrown under the bus over the Irish Northern Irish Protocol.
Which means,
I think, what we'll see is an opening up of negotiations. I think they will come to a point in which the British government will continue to hammer home the argument that for the Northern Irish economy there's major potential here. They were talking very openly at the weekend about the types of investors who are thinking of coming here because of access to the single market, access to the UK market. So I think what we'll see is a shift. And I think that what is really coming to fore here is the protocol is wrapped up in Brexit. It is not something that can be disconnected anymore from Britain's relationship with Europe.
But will any of this please the DUP?
I think that the DUP need to be realistic about what they can expect. You know, they have seen a hardline stance from this Tory government up until now in relation to the protocol with the introduction of the Protocol Act. Will they see through on that, or will the DUP have to compromise as well? I think that the problem the DUP have is even if there is a compromise which is in their favour, they're not really great at going out and selling that to their electorate. They're very bad at selling any success, and so they've went for this, you know, all or nothing type stance. Now, the recent Belfast Telegraph poll showed that was actually quite popular among their voters. But let's remember, you know, the cold weather hasn't started yet. You know, the cost of living crisis that we're expecting, you know, it hasn't really bit yet. And you mean, there's no difference between, you know, someone sitting in a cold home that votes for Sinn Féin and someone sitting in a cold home that votes for the DUP. So as we move into the autumn, the cold spell, the massive increase in energy prices that few people can manage to sustain, when that comes in, will DUP voters still use will their priority still be the protocol, or will it be, you know, the cost of living and getting the assembly up and running? No one, I think, when they're struggling to feed their children and pay for lunches and, you know, wash their clothes, wants to see someone getting paid for a job they're not doing.
And Alison Morris makes a very good point there, because it's going to be exactly the same for the people who would support the DUP and those who support Sinn Féin.
But the surveys we've done at the Institute of Irish Studies in Liverpool have made it very clear unionists, nationalists and leaders want compromise. Whenever concessions came from Europe over medicines, over the movement of goods, the reduction of paperwork, All communities supported that. It furthers your point, Alison. It's about the realities of this for people. And I think Alison is correct. Whenever the winter comes, people are going to, especially if Europe and the UK are having negotiations, and if Europe is compromising, and if Europe is obviously reducing the level of paperwork, etc.
The UK hold out?
Well, they can't hold out because of the context of the cost of living crisis, but they also can't hold out if Europe continues, which is what Sakovic said at the weekend. He made it very clear that if you come and tell us what the issues are and evidence what the issues are, we will find ways around it. You know, Gavin Robinson mentioned an issue that which is really important: 25% tariff on British steel coming into Northern Ireland. That affects your construction industry. Like it's a major problem. We have to stop pretending this is an ideology constitutional problem. There are problems in the protocol, but Europe has shown that it is prepared to compromise, and I think with Liz Truss we're going to see an acceptance of that compromise. This is essentially a retail issue. We have to improve the flow of retail goods, and what we really need is for people to understand that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build a new economy. Belfast is now the 7th best economy in the UK out of 179. We're a world leader in fintech, cybersecurity, etc. There's another generation to add on to that. There's a continuance of the peace process here. And whenever people are confronted by the poverty of fuel and all of those things, then people are going to have to start thinking about how do you actually build an economy here? And one of the ways you build an economy here is by benefiting from being both in the single European market and the UK customs territory.
And isn't that going to be part of the pressure that will be brought to bear on Jeffrey Donaldson through all of this?
I think it is. I mean, he could go into an election thinking, well, people support my stance in the protocol, but that election would take place well into the winter, and at that time, you know, people will be really struggling. People are struggling now. Can you imagine what it's like if we get like a particularly harsh winter? It's going to be awful, and people really genuinely will be struggling to heat their homes and feed their children. And, you know, these aren't just people who, in the past, who were maybe living below the poverty line and struggling. It's now, you know, we talk about the working poor. It's people, you know, out doing, you know, two jobs in one household, still not able to turn their heating on, still not able to feed their children. And I think that the DUP are going to have to answer to their electorate on that.
Two quick points I want to raise, and given that time is short, one to each of you. First of all, to you, Alison, who's going to be knocking at the door to say, please, can I be the next Secretary of State for Northern Ireland? It's
interesting because nobody ever particularly wants to be the Secretary of State, but in this occasion we have Conor Burns jumping up and down with his hand raised going, please, 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 sir, you know, can I be the next Secretary of State? Whether he'll manage to be the next Secretary of State, I don't know. But, you know, it's usually someone that we've never heard of from the backbenches, and they land here as if they've just landed on the moon most times, unable to get to grips with our very strange political process.
And a final question for you, Peter Shirlow. How will we remember Boris Johnson in this part of the kingdom?
I don't wish to, really, so it's a hard question to answer. I think he was a disaster. I think this was somebody who didn't read his detail, he didn't cover his brief, he played populist politics, he was clearly brought in on borrowed time. I don't think there'll be much of a legacy for Boris Johnson.
Peter Shirlow and Alison Morris, thank you both very much indeed. And that is View from Stormont this Monday night. We're back again at the same time next week. Until then, from all of us on the programme, thank you for watching. Good night and sleep well. And thank you.